as you can see, we're going to have a slideshow. Some of you may have heard about the Bhaktivedanta Research Center in Calcutta. If you haven't, if you stick around for an hour, then you'll find out. This is our logo. It's been changed a little bit since I was there. I started the establishment of a library in 2008, and in 2017 I got to a point with my health where it wasn't possible to travel and do all the fundraising anymore. So I retired from the management of the BRC. This slideshow that you're going to see now is the last version that I did of a slideshow. So this is a couple of years old now, but it's still got all the essential ingredients in it. They have developed now finally a new slideshow, and they're sending out a monthly newsletter now. I just got the first month this week. So the running of the BRC now is in the hands of several devotees from Mumbai, Balarama Srila Prabhu and Gauranga Prabhu, and also a team from the Calcutta Temple. So it's become a joint venture between Mumbai and Calcutta. And just recently, we've had some very encouraging news that last year, the Bombay University granted affiliation with the BRC. And this year, I heard a few weeks ago that we've now got affiliation with the Calcutta University also. Affiliation means that you become a recognized arm, if you like, of the university. And it means that we can run PhD courses in Gaudiya Vaishnavism, and those, what do you call them? The scholars that come out from that program, they'll gradually become the chief literary resources for all the universities in the world. What's been happening so far is that the Gaudiya Vaishnava tradition was being observed and counted by various scholars, but they were all from America. Many of them, of course, had no respect for Vaishnava culture and saw no value in it. So we wanted to set up a system whereby ISKCON and its affiliates will be recognized as the place to go to get information on Gaudiya Vaishnavism. So it's very important, because I can see in 20, 30, 40, 50 years, we'll have a whole team of scholars, maybe 20 or 30 PhDs in Gaudiya Vaishnavism. And as the material resources of this planet become more and more under stress and strain, people are going to be looking for solutions to the problems in life. And we want to aim to have ISKCON as the main go-to place for doing research. This is not just about having a library where you save the books. This is about having people coming PhD level and really seriously looking into all the books that we have, and then developing, let's say, like theories about Vedic economy. Yeah, right now the economy is the important thing in people's lives. Unfortunately, the economy is consumer driven, so it demands that more and more of the Earth's resources get thrown into production of cars, computers, whatever they may be. But we're going to get to a point where the planet is just not going to, it's not going to sustain itself in the face of this mass consumerism. It's a reckless civilization. So they're going to be looking for alternatives, and this will be our preaching, that we're going to be presenting the answers to all the major questions, political, economic, sociologically. We're going to be directing people and preaching from the platform of Prabhupada's books and books based on Prabhupada's books. So it's very important that we get an active functioning library, that people can come, they can study there, they can get their degrees, MA, BA, PhD, whatever, and gradually on the topmost level of education, or at least the most so-called intelligent people, they'll start to take notice. Yeah. When they run out of their materialistic ideas for happiness, then that's where ISKCON starts. So we want to have a solid, solid body of scholars and scientists that are basing their work and the teachings on Gaudiya Vaishnava philosophy and action. You'll see that any government, when they want to investigate new things, they hire or they start at what they call think tanks, and they get the best scholars in the field to come and give them advice, the politicians. That's actually good. So we want to be the people that they go to get advice from. So this is just really the beginning. We started this project, as I say, in 2009, and so we've been running now for 10 years. We've made a lot of progress. We've got about 18,000 works, books, documents, etc., as you'll see. And now, we're getting recognition from the top universities, and that will increase. So we're already starting to get a reputation amongst the scholarly people, the academics, that we have this amazing library, and that gradually by associating with devotees who are scholars, then the other scholars will also start accepting what we're teaching, and then it'll snowball. That's the idea, it'll get bigger and bigger. So we think, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, that's not a very long time. And when we get to that point, 30, 40 years hence, then we'll be ready. We'll have all the materials that we need to offer people a much better life, based on the Varnashram system, etc. So that's a general overview. So let's go back to the beginning. Back to the beginning. One more. Okay, so this is our logo. We are offering a complete Vaishnava literary resource and Vedic cosmology library. So the idea of having a Vedic temple of the Planetarium was one of the reasons why we set up this library. Rabindra Sauri Prabhu advised us that if we want to be taken seriously, we're presenting very complex ideas from the fifth canto in the new TOVP, so we better know what we're talking about, and we should be ready with all the answers. So we wanted to have a cosmology library also, specifically with anything that's ever been written on Vedic cosmology, and also Western cosmology, so that we can compare the two. So that was a major driving force in setting up the library. So thanks to Ravindra Swarup. So next one. So I was with Prabhupada in 1976. This is August 15th. We'd just come back from the West. Prabhupada had just arrived in Bombay, and during the daytime he called for Giriraj, who's on the right there. He was the temple president. Nitai Das was there. He was Prabhupada's, or had been Prabhupada's main editor for a lot of his books. And Prabhupada told them, they discussed about setting up a library. It was not a new thing. Prabhupada had asked for that previously. And as the Juhu Beach temple was getting near completion, Prabhupada wanted to make sure, he said he wanted a first-class library that scholars will come to, and when reading the philosophy, they'll become devotees. So that was his idea. So he said our library should contain all of his own books, those of all the acharyas, including Madhvacharya, Ramanujacharya, etc., as well as the Upanishads and other bona fide texts. So Nitai was given 4,000 rupees to start this library. Unfortunately, he got into spiritual difficulty shortly afterwards, so nothing happened, and the Bombay temple didn't actually set up the library. So when I started this project with Pranava Prabhu, this was one of the driving forces, again, that Prabhupada had asked for a library. So there's no doubt that what we're aiming for is bona fide, it's definitely desirable by Krishna and Srila Prabhupada. So Prabhupada gave those instructions, those literatures that we just named, but he said nothing from Vivekananda, Gandhi, Ram Tirtha and these people. He said they're all bogus. Yeah, because even if they touch the Vedic literature, they spoil it. So he said just bona fide books, and that could be from any Vaishnava tradition, plus the books that are necessary. In that list, actually, he said also Shankaracharya. So then I was surprised, and I said, but Prabhupada, don't we say, or in Lord Chaitanya said that anybody who reads the, philosophy through Shankaracharya, then he'll be doomed. So Prabhupada said, not if you know the arguments. He said, we get their books, we learn what they're saying, and then we defeat them. So he said it's good for that. So we're endeavoring in that direction. Next one. Oh, exceed your vision, that would be nice. All right, so this is the building. This was given to us in 2000 by a man called, what was his name? Anyway, by one gentleman, Mawari in Calcutta. So we got this in 2000. Mr. Shamsuka, you can see ISKCON on the top. It's actually 5 stories high, so it's a bigger building than looks here. So when we were looking for a place to start the library, then this building had already been given to ISKCON, but the donor actually was a bit of a wild kind of personality. He was on what do you call that disease you have to check? Oh, insulin. He was on insulin every day, so it used to give him these mood swings. So one day he'd be completely friendly and praising you up and down. The next day it would be literally frothing at the mouth, or white froth coming out, and his eyes would bulge out of his head, and he would shout and yell and stop all the work. So we had to endure him for about 5 or 6 years. But he gave the building, Krishna tricked him. So we got the building, and that's where we have the Bhaktivedanta Research Center and Library. Next one. So this is myself. Of course, this is Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati's Samadhi. When we received the main portion of books, we went to Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati's Samadhi there and took his permission and asked for his blessings so that the project would develop nicely. Now this is, my brain is really not working. Pranava Prabhu was working on getting his PhD. He got that in 2010. I met with him in Sweden in 2009, or 2008 actually, and we started to talk about this library. He already had an idea that we should start up something like an Institute for Vaishnava Studies or something like that, and he was himself working on his PhD about the beginnings of the modern expression of Gaudiya Vaishnavism, beginning from Bhaktivinoda Thakur up to Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati's departure. So he got his PhD in 2010, Since then, he's become very much in demand. He gets invited to go and lecture in many places. He's also on the faculty of Stockholm University. So, you know, this is the first step for us. He did recently have a brain hemorrhage, but fortunately he's recovered from that practically completely. So he's a very important man. So he and I were the co-directors. Next one. And this is the cover of the book that was put out from Pranava Prabhu. It was actually printed by Oxford University Press. So if you get your thesis printed by them, it's very prestigious. It means they really respect what you're doing. So this is what it's called, Modern Hindu Personalism. What's that? History, life, and thought of Bhaktivedanta Saraswati. Sorry, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. So this, of course, is the Yog Pit. And on the basis of this book now, we're starting our courses for the students, okay? We have an advisory board, Krishna Chetra Swami. He's got a PhD in theology or something like that. Pradyumna Das was Prabhupada's personal literary secretary, you could say. He was correcting all the Sanskrit in Prabhupada's books. Prabhupada worked very closely with him. And out of all of Prabhupada's disciples, he spent the most time on Prabhupada's personal party. Although we didn't see him there very much, but he was editing as we were traveling. And he could go, if he was stuck with something, he could go and discuss it with Prabhupada. And then that was all, the corrected text was typed up and sent to Los Angeles and then put out in the book form. So he did extremely valuable service. Lucien Wong, Lalita Madhava Prabhu, he's initiated by one of the Gaudiya Acharyas, I forget who, but he's a good friend of ours. He spends a lot of time studying at the Oxford Centre for Hinduism. And we've also got Rembat Lutyams, Gopinath Acharya Das, who is an ISKCON devotee. So they're our advisory board. Yeah. And this was the official opening, June 30th, 2009. That's the donor, Mr. Shyam Sukha. Jayapataka Maharaj, this was only like 6 months after he had his stroke, but he was so determined to see this project come up. So he made a tremendous effort to come and do the opening. And of course, Bhakti Charu Maharaj is a scholar also. So we started off okay, yeah. This was how the building was when I came to it. It was deserted. Mr. Shyam Sukha was living up on the next floor up. But devotees that we'd had in there at the beginning, gradually Shyam Sukha fell out with all of them and drove them all out. So the building was empty, but he did want something doing. And he actually said he wanted to see us develop a library and have scholars coming and, you know, discussing Bhagavad Gita. He's a Mawari Jain, but he said his favorite book is the Bhagavad Gita. So he wanted some kind of Bhagavad Gita courses and things like that. So he gave his building to ISKCON. That was in 2000. So this picture's at the beginning of 2009. I just started doing renovation work on it. You can see the windows have been knocked out. This framework here was the shelving for the library. Yeah, next one. So that was before. 6 months later, this is the transformation of that room. Little hard work and lots of money. Actually, the MVT Trust gave us about 40 lakhs. I made a presentation to them about getting a library up and running. They liked it, so they gave us 10 lakhs, then another 10 lakhs, then another 10, and we ended up getting about 40 lakhs from them. Fully air-conditioned and computerized, yeah. and partitions so students could come and do their studies. Yeah. A secure section for rare books. Yeah. And this moving rack, it's like a concertina. It can open or close. So we had read an advert in the newspapers that this there's a music production company. What's the do re mi fa so? What's the Hindi equivalent of that? Saregama, son, good. That's the only way I can remember it. So that company had bought some company in Calcutta. They went broke, so they were selling off all their equipment. We went there trying to find some kind of fireproof cabinets, and we found this moving rack, so we immediately purchased that. So we've been setting things up. Thanks. This is Janakaraj Prabhu. He came a few months after we first opened. He was our treasurer for 9 years, living in that building. And that's the fireproof safe that we bought. It's good for 2 hours. So all the important historical documents are all in that cabinet. And as we expand, of course, we'll get more. So we began with 4,000 titles. The current catalogue is 22,000, and we have 2,000 plus digital manuscripts. Yeah. So the core collection was the personal collection of Sundar Ananda Vijayabhinod. I mentioned him last night, wasn't it? Yes. That he was one of the chief scholars that was putting all the publications out for Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. That's him as a young man when he was the editor. There's Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati there. And he built up a very first-class library. Later on, when the Gaudiya Math split apart, he took the whole library and put it in his own home. And that's where it stayed. So that was from 1937 up until 2009. Next one. Now, as I explained, we were negotiating to buy that collection. Somehow or another, at the last minute, they changed their minds, the family, and they had a connection with Bodhian Maharaj here. He's the Acharya for the Gopinath Gaudiya Math. And they gave all the collection to him, or to the Gopinath Gaudiya Math. So he told us he had no place to put them. And we had a discussion with him just before Kartik in 2009. And we told him about the library, that it was now up and running. So he was very, very open, very cooperative. He said, look, we don't have any place to put these books. You've got a first-class library now. So you take all the books. We were going to ask him if we could get permission to access the library in his temple. But instead he gave us the whole library to put in our building. And we signed a simple agreement. This was the first day of Kartik in 2009. So I see Maharaj now and again. He's very favorable to ISKCON. He praises Srila Prabhupada like anything. He's very, very nice Vaishnava. Next. So this is Sundarananda Vijayabhinod's collection, or rather some of it. One of the important books, first books written in English, of course, was from Bhaktivedanta Thakur in 1896. He sent out this Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, His Life and Precepts. It's a small book, but it was sent out to many universities all around the world. And Prabhupada, of course, that was 1896 was the year Prabhupada was born. So Prabhupada told us that it was not a coincidence that he was born the same year that this book was sent in English all around the world. Yeah. We opened up one dusty-looking book, and this photograph fell out of the pages, And this is Jagannath Das Babaji. It's an actual photograph. So I think it's the only one in existence on the planet as far as we know. So he must have been about 120 years old when this was taken. We think it was around the time when he confirmed the discovery of the Yog Pit. He was taken there by Bhaktivedanta Thakur, and he immediately leaps up and down in the air. You can see the condition that he's in. But that gave him great ecstasy. So that original photograph is there, yeah. This is some of the collections of periodicals. The Gaudiya Math were very prolific, literary. Many magazines and books were coming out. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, was prolific writing. So we found that every issue, or almost every issue of each publication had been saved by Sundar and Ananda Vijay and kept in the library. So in these books here, you've got the Nadia Prakash, about 20 years worth of publication. That's one newspaper every day. That was a daily newspaper, so we got the whole lot from beginning to end. There's the Gaudiya. The Sajantoshani was being published like in the 1870s in Bengali by Bhaktivedanta Thakur. Later on, when the push came to start thinking about going to the West, in 1927, the Sajantoshani was transformed into an English publication. What was the name? The Harmonist. We also, in the collection here, there was a good number of the Harmonists, and also the Hindi Bhagwat. Yeah. So this is like all the volumes of the Harmonists that we could find, or that he found. There's a couple of sections I think that we don't have yet, but practically mostly we've got everything. So very wonderful that he's had the foresight to save all these literatures. Yeah. This is the Nadia Prakash. There's Bon Maharaj on that page. Now I don't speak Bengali, but for some reason or another they were advertising Bon Maharaj in the Harmonist, and it must have been either when he went to England or when he came back to England. So they did an article on that. And as Prabhupada said, if one of the devotees went out from the Gaudiya Math to the marketplace and sold even one of these Nadia Prakashas, he would come back and he would be praised and appreciated very much by Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. So when we got this collection, they were bound up in 30 volumes thick. When we stripped them back and then did all the preservation work and we did the lamination, it doubled the size. So we have 60 volumes, as you'll see, of the Nadia Prakash. Yeah. This is the Bhagavat, it's a Hindi journal. This is from 1931. Next. And this was a quite amazing find. There were two books, or rather three, it looked like three books that were bound together as one. And the first two books, one was a commentary on Shankaracharya, the other one was another publication that came out in 1871. That was another commentary. And the back section of the book were all blank pages. So somebody used that as a scrapbook, and these writings here, these are actually clip outs from other publications and stuck into this book. So it says Thoughts on Popular Topics by Kedarnath Dutt, Deputy Collector and Magistrate. So these go back to 1871, yeah. So one of the articles that was pasted into that book was this poem about Haridas Thakur, born of Muslim parents, Haridas, and trained in youth in Muslim creed. Thy noble heart to Vaishnav truth did pass, thy holy acts they candor plead. So he had that published in the local newspapers, and there's a footnote there. In that footnote he mentions that Haridas Thakur was actually whipped in the marketplace in Delhi. And I still haven't been able to figure out why he put Delhi, because we always think of it taking place in Navadvip. Anyway, that's what he says there, so somebody could do some research. But you can see the condition of the book. These are all bugs that love eating paper. Yeah. And of course, in that poem, the last stanza is the famous, he reasons ill who tell that Vaishnavas die when thou art living still in sound. The Vaishnavas die to live, and living try to spread a holy life around. So that's the poem. This may be actually the first time that it was ever published, 1871. Next. He signed all of his articles as Sharagrahi Vaishnav. And this one here, you can see he was in Puri, August 1871. Yeah. And this one is interesting. Adore, adore ye all the happy... No, sorry, wrong song. I can't read it from here. This is the Drinker's Song, where Bhaktivinoda Thakur had noted that there were so many people taking to, liquor and drink, and how will they ever save themselves unless they meet a Vaishnava? So that whole poem is about that. Now this is very interesting. This is a verse that Bhaktivinoda Thakur wrote himself at the birth of Lalit Prasad Thakur, one of his sons. So he made up this verse, and then next. And he personally worked out the horoscope for his son, and there's actually 8 pages of this. You can see the different planetary periods are marked there. So it seems Bhaktivinoda Thakur studied astrology when he was 12 years old. So he was quite competent. We always think of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati as being an astrologer before he took up his preaching. This is where he got it from his father. Next. This is a letter that Bhaktivinoda Thakur sent to his home. I think this was around about 1910. And you can see that's his signature there at the bottom. Yeah. And this is another piece of a manuscript from Bhaktivinoda Thakur. Yeah. And this was one of the most wonderful finds. This is a songbook, handwritten by Bhaktivinoda Thakur. There's about 200 pages. You can see his handwriting there. Next. And up the top 2 lines there, the Hare Krishna mantra with the Gai Gaura Madhu Sware. So I think that's Bengali characters. Next one. And these are the songs that are included in that book. So about 26 different poems and songs that he'd written himself, and he compiled them all into this one book. So all in his own handwriting. You can see the Bhoga Arati, Prasad Luchira Phala, etc., etc. Arandaya Kirtan, all the famous songs. Gaura Arati, Yugal Arati. Next. We also found a copy of Bhaktivinoda Thakur's commentary on the Bhagavad Gita. You can see again, it's practically finished. We just saved that in time. And it's been out of print for a long, long time. You go to any of the Gaudiya mats, they don't have it. No bookstore has it, so very rare, yeah. This is a 2-volume set. All different acharyas' comments on the Padma Purana. So they were collected together by Bhaktivinoda Thakur and published in this jewel set, yeah. This is some articles handwritten by Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. They were sent in a draft form to Sundar Ananda Vijayavinod. He would correct them and then they would be published. So they were working very closely together on these literatures. So we found one folder we thought was just kind of scrap, but I showed it to Pradyumna Prabhu that he had come to visit from America, and he got completely into it and told us this is all different articles written by Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. Yeah. This is another piece of an essay. It's quite interesting, at least for us foreigners, how in India people are very adept at speaking their language, and then suddenly in the middle of it they'll throw in a whole English, sentence or a couple of sentences, and then go straight back to their own language again. So he does that here. There's some in the middle of this Bengali, he stops and starts writing something in English, and then continues on again. So they can see the Gaudiya printing works. That was the printing press that they installed in the Bag Bazaar Mat, and Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati had it placed so that the deities could look at that printing press and see that the preaching work was going on. Yeah. This is the signature of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, Nityasvadika Siddhanta Saraswati, your ever well-wisher. So this is where Prabhupada got the phrase from his own Guru Maharaj. All of Prabhupada's letters are signed your ever well-wisher, and here it is in Bengali. Yeah. We found this one sheet with a list of names of disciples of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati who were to become professors and teachers in this Thakur Bhaktivinoda Research Institute. So we felt happy, because I was a little dubious when we called the BRC the Bhaktivedanta Research Center, because Prabhupada didn't really like the word research. Yeah, he was read some strong comments. But when I found this in the collection, I was very happy, because Bhaktivinoda Thakur called it a research institute. And there's quite a number of PhDs, MAs, BAs. They were going to be the staff. But unfortunately, very shortly after this work had begun on establishing this research institute, the breakdown of the Gaudiya map occurred, and eventually the government came and took over the land. It's the land that's right next to the Yog Pit. You'll see there's a school there. So that was originally Bhaktivinoda Thakur Research Institute. The government took it away and then made it into a mundane, children's school. Yeah. This is the biography, the only biography that we could find, Saraswati Jai Shri. This was printed in 1934. Then this next printing was 1997. This was compiled and written by Sundar and Ananda Vijay. It's a series of glorifications of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. Many other Gaudiya Mat men added to that, so it came out quite a thick book in 1934. But he was actually planning to print 3 volumes, separate volumes, but they only got the first one out, the other ones disappeared. Next. This is an extremely important document. This is the autobiography. This is another section of Saraswati Jayashri, but it was never published. This one is very important. This is the last wishes of His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada, 31st of December 1936 at 10:30 a.m. It was witnessed by 4 of the leading Gaudiya Mat members. There's about 12 different items here that Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati mentioned. Go on. This is a close-up. You can see the second item there. Advice to form a governing body of 10 to 12 persons for the management of the mission. But Kunja Baba will manage as long as he lives. So this, Prabhupada said, the failure of the Gaudiya Mat leaders to form a GBC led to the breakdown of the entire structure. They all went their own ways because they didn't follow this one instruction. So Prabhupada always told us, and we were very happy to find this authentic instruction from Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur about how the movement should go on. Next one. Other things that we found, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, or Bimal Prasad as he was called. He's used both names, Bimal Prasad, Siddhanta Saraswati. He was running astronomy courses, so there was about 3 years worth of these astronomy books, and these have proved to be very valuable for helping us to figure out the temple of the Vedic Planetarium, because this is all astronomy. So there's about 3 years or 4 years of those books. Yeah, next. This is the first book that Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati published that was not about astrology or astronomy. This is the Bangay Samaji Katha from 1899, and this is an original print of that. You can see the back has been chewed up by all the bugs, but fortunately most of it's intact. Yeah. We also found this Survey of India map of Nadia, put out by the British, and this happens to be covering 1917 to 1918. Just go ahead. So here we are. This is modern day Navadweep. This is the Jalangi, the Tarampur ferry. This is the Ganges, and this is Mayapur. And in those days, in 1918, there was nothing there. No buildings, maybe a couple of buildings just there where the Yog Pit ended up. But apart from that, it was deserted. Now, of course, because of ISKCON, the whole place is completely, it looks like a Calcutta slum, frankly. But anyway, it's there. So we've got the Temple of the Vedic Planetarium around here somewhere. We've got Bhaktivinoda Thakur's house on the opposite side of the Ganges. And from there he had a vision of seeing a golden city. And he had that 2 or 3 times apparently. So our temple, the TLVP, Mayapur Chandra Dayamandir, is right in the line of sight from Bhaktivinoda Thakur's house up as far as the Yog Pit. So this is from 1918. Very, very valuable map. Just go back a second. Oh, wait a minute. No, so where you are. You can say there, Mayapur. And Prabhupada mentions this in one of his purports, that it was formerly called Mayapur and later on became Mayapur. Okay, next. So that's a look at the Sundar Ananda collection. This is a tutor. For several years, he was our head librarian. He's moved on to other pastures this last year or so, but we've still got all of his books. So he is like one of these nerds, as they say in English, obsessed, with a particular activity. So his activity was that he would earn money by teaching at the Italian embassy, because he's Italian, but he speaks Bangla as well. And with whatever money he had, he was buying books, anything to do with religion, culture, education in India. He would just buy it all up. So most of it we wouldn't use, but I think I mentioned yesterday, to get university affiliation, you have to have a first-class library. So having 18,000 works there, plus 3,000 periodicals published by various universities, makes this one of the most valuable collections anywhere in India, at least. So he's got all of his stuff here on the shelves. Next. And divided into sections, there's all kinds of things. Sections on Vedic science and maths, Jagannath Puri, Kirtan, collection of over 400 commentaries on the Vedanta Sutra, 200 plus versions of Bhagavad Gita, and on and on. So he did a very valuable service there. Now another book that he found was this Sri Krishna Chaitanya Volume 1. Now this was written by, I can't see the name, Nishikant Sanyal. So he was some professor, but he was a disciple of Bhaktisiddhanta, and he was ordered by Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati to write up a history of the Gaudiya Vaishnava movement from different angles of vision. The first volume of that was published in 1933. they were already waiting to get the order to go to England. Bon Maharaj, Sambhidananda, and Bhakti Pradeep Tirtha, but Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati wouldn't allow them to go until they had at least the first volume of this book. So this is what they were distributing when they went to Europe. It's all in English. And it says there also that there's a foreword by Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. So this is a very valuable work also. This is a small booklet commemorating in 1916 Bhaktivinoda Thakur's passing, which was in 1914. So a glimpse into the life of Thakur Bhaktivinoda by, I guess they were followers of his, in 1916. Okay, next. This was another valuable book. This was put out by the Calcutta University in 1917. It was the listings of all the Vaishnava literature of medieval Bengal. So it's like an almanac, you can look through it and find different references, etc. Yeah, next. Chaitanya Chandrodaya, a drama in 10 acts by Kavi Karnapura. So this one's from 1885. Next. This is Charles Wilkins. He was the first foreigner to do a translation of the Bhagavad Gita in English. So there you can see the Bhagavad Gita, dialogues between Krishna and Arjuna. So this originally came out, I think, in 1785. There were several reprints done of this afterwards. This particular book was reprinted from 1845. That's Charles Wilkins. So these were the scholars from Europe that started coming into India and seriously looking at the Sanskrit literature and tradition. But their motive was to show that what we had in so-called Hinduism was vastly inferior to Christianity. That was their actual intention. But still, we got the books there, so very important piece of literature, that one. Next one. This is Sir William Jones. He was the leading scholar of his day. He was fluent in 14 languages. He could speak bits and pieces of about another 20 languages. So he was actually the foremost of all the scholars. He started the School of Oriental Studies, I think, in Calcutta. The Asiatic Society. That became very prominent. That was begun by William Jones and a couple of other professors. So we found, a tutor found a couple of volumes, extracts from the Vedas by William Jones. Yeah. And that actually, sorry, go back. That particular volume was printed in 1799. So over 230 years old. It's in good condition as well. Yeah, next. A bit nearer to home. So that was a tutor's collection, some of it, little bits and pieces. I knew that there was something in Prabhupada's rooms. Janani Vas was keeping it locked up. So when we started the library, I approached him and we opened up the Almirah in Prabhupada's bedroom. And there wasn't that much there, but there was a full set of japa beads that Prabhupada had been given in 1976 when he was in Hawaii, big ones. And he used to use them all the time. Not every time, but he liked to chant on them. So keeping them safe, Janani Vas put them in this cabinet along with a few other items. So next, one of the items was this series of postcards. These were written around about 1945 to 49. There were offers of subscriptions for Prabhupada's Back to Godhead magazine. You can see his address there, number 6, Sitakanta Banerjee Lane. He was living in Calcutta and he was publishing Back to Godhead. So this is from different people asking for subscriptions, yeah. This is a letter from Prabhupada to the governor of Bihar in January 1950. It's interesting. Prabhupada was very, very determined. So he wrote this letter asking for an interview with the governor of Bihar. Apparently, he already knew him, and he must have met with him several times. Because I can't read Prabhupada's letter; it's too faint. But the response here is that His Excellency the Governor will be glad to see you, but he will have no talk with you about the publication of your books, and he cannot give you any help in that respect. So Prabhupada must have really pushed him hard. Also, it will not be possible for His Excellency to approach any publishers, nor can he give any financial assistance. So don't ask, for money for publishing, don't ask for contacts for publishing, and don't ask for any help for your writing. In these circumstances, it is not worthwhile for you to incur the expenditure of coming over to Patna. But if you are still desirous of seeing His Excellency, let me know so that a date and time can be fixed for your interview. You were also advised not to send the manuscripts to His Excellency. So you couldn't get much more of a rejection letter than that one. Any writer, they'll always tell you, you have to send it out to hundreds of publishers before you can get somebody to help you. So it's a well-known phenomenon. But Prabhupada was just plowing ahead. I mean, he just, So what happened next? Prabhupada writes or replies that letter, I'm in due receipt of your office letter of the 5th instance, and I have to thank you for the same. Thank you for giving me a refusal. I have no intention to disturb His Excellency the Governor for some financial help in respect of publishing my works. I have to seek an interview with His Excellency on a cultural and peace mission only. So if you can't get in one way, get in another. I hope, therefore, that you will kindly arrange for the interview and fix up a time and date as early as possible and let me know more when we meet. So that was January 1950, next. And we found this along with that, a small press release that Prabhupada put out for publication, Srila Bhaktivedanta, Sri Abhay Charanaravindo Bhaktivedanta. So in 1950, Prabhupada was already using the name Bhaktivedanta. The editor of Back to Godhead, Calcutta, has come to Patna on a cultural peace mission. He underlines peace. He will see His Excellency, the Governor of Bihar, on the 18th of January. So anyway, any little, hole in the wall that Prabhupada could get through, he was doing it. Nice. Okay. We also found in the Almira an original copy of the famous Truth and Beauty Back to Godhead magazine that was published in 1958, I think. And there's a Hindi version here from 1957, I believe. Now, this is a very important document. This is a power of attorney that Prabhupada gave to Tamal Krishna Goswami in 1971. So Prabhupada had arrived back in India with 4 new sannyasis and Tamal Krishna Maharaj to begin ISKCON's work in India. And in the time prior to that, from 67 on to 1971, Achyutananda Prabhu was practically the only disciple that Prabhupada had who was living in India at that time. He had left America because he didn't want to get sent to Vietnam. They had this draft. So he went to India. And Prabhupada would write to him on a regular basis. And he several times asked him to find some land in Mayapur so that he could have what he called an American house in either Vrindavan or Mayapur. Unfortunately, for whatever reason, he wasn't able to carry out that instruction. So when Prabhupada himself came back to start preaching in India in 1970, one of the first things that he did was to engage Tamal Krishna Goswami in getting some land in Mayapur. So that paper that we saw there was a power of attorney he had gone there. We found one, what was his name? Jabed Ali Sheikh, who was a Muslim. So he sold ISKCON the first piece of land in Mayapur. How much benefit will that man get for his life? So gradually it was expanded. Anyway, Tamal Krishna Maharaj was given this official power of attorney to act on it as ISKCON in the purchase of that first piece of land. If the electricity's off, why have we got lights in? All right, so we'll wait a few minutes and see if it comes back. In the meantime, does anybody have any questions or comments so far?
It's amazing to see that Srila Prabhupada took so many things actually from his Guru Maharaj. He said once that whatever I learned from my father and from my Guru Maharaj, everything was right. So now...
Well, you know, when we started up the library, I started doing some research on different things. And one thing that struck me was how ISKCON was practically speaking like the, you know, the child of the prototype institution of the Gaudiya Math. Whatever Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati was doing in the Gaudiya Math, that's exactly what Prabhupada started doing when he formed ISKCON. So if you like, it's actually, ISKCON is like a renewed version of what the Gaudiya Math should have been, but failed because it fell apart from fighting and whatever. But everything that Prabhupada did, you see that Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati himself had introduced somewhere along the line. So publications, of course, was one of the most important activities. But, you know, installation of Radha Krishna deities, going out and preaching, sannyasis. There were no sannyasis before Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. That was one thing that I meant to say about that map of Nadia. Yeah, that was from 1917, 1918. Who knows what happened in 1918? Anybody? There was a very significant development for Gaudiya Vaishnavism, which took place in 1918, when that map was made. Does anybody know what it is? Huh? No, the old pit was already existing. It wasn't built, but they knew where it was. It was the sannyas of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. At Gaur Purnima in 1918, he took sannyas from a picture of his Guru Maharaj and began his preaching. So that was in Mayapur, that was 1918. Anything else? Any other questions or comments?
It is unexpected that Prabhupada would take up the mission because he was not prominent Gaudiya Math member when Bhaktisiddhanta was there. It's amazing how he came. Just how to...
Well, it's interesting. What's your name again?
Gokul Chandra.
Gokul
Chandra.
Okay, Gokul Chandra Prabhu was just making the observation. What was it? You just... How Shiva Prabhupada, it's amazing how Shiva Prabhupada came up to carry the mission of Bhaktisiddhanta, although in the time of Gaudiya Math he was not the most prominent member there or sannyasi or like that. Yes, well, I often tell people that the order to preach in the West was not given exclusively to Prabhupada, but it was particularly given to him as his service. But the general instruction for preaching in the West, that was already, you know, everybody knew that that was the desire of Bhaktivinoda, it was the desire of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. So certainly he knew about it all. But particularly Prabhupada was the one who was told, you use your abilities, you know, to preach to the Westerners or preach in the English language. So Prabhupada always kept that instruction within his heart. And I mean, he was initiated either in late 1932 or early 1933. And in 1935, he was at Radhakund. And Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur preached a lot to them about publishing and writing books. And also there was some suggestion that Prabhupada become the new temple president of the Gaudiya Math in Bombay, because Prabhupada was living in Bombay. Some Gaudiya Math sannyasis came and talked with him. He was very active in finding the land and raising the money to build the first Gaudiya Math there. So he was doing so nicely. The Gaudiya Math members thought, well, you know, it's a new temple, needs a new temple president. Why not Abhay Charanaravinda? Because he's done so much, he's so capable of managing also. So they suggested to Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati that he be made the new TP in Bombay. But Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati said no. He said he is better off outside of your company. And he made this comment. Actually, this comment was earlier in the year. That personal meeting was in Kartik of 35. But the comment that was made by Bhaktisiddhanta was at the beginning of 1935, not at the end. There was a meeting in Bombay. So Bhaktisiddhanta made this comment that he's better off outside of your company. In the future, when the time is right, he himself will do everything. So Prabhupada told me and Abhiram that in Calcutta in 1977. He related that to us. And Abhiram, I think, asked Prabhupada, did your Guru Maharaj know that you would go on to do all the things that you have now done? And Prabhupada said yes. So although you say Prabhupada was not one of the most prominent members, certainly most of the devotees in the Gaudiya Math knew him because he had written that poem, Adore, adore ye all, the happy day, blessed than heaven, sweeter than May. And it was published. When Bhaktisiddhanta read that English verse, he said, anything he writes, you publish, no questions asked. So Prabhupada was definitely recognized by Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, and there was one other Gaudiya Math god brother, who made this comment. He said, you'll see that in the future, some great personality who is already amongst us will carry this mission forward. So whether he was speaking just, out of speculation or whether he knew something, I don't know. But he predicted that there's already somebody with us who's going to do this work. So Prabhupada was definitely recognized. There's no question of that. And, his whole life was developed around Vaishnavism. And at school, Prabhupada said he wrote one English language essay when he was at Scottish Churches College. And when the papers were marked, the teacher that was doing the marking, he brought the paper with him to the classroom. He said, who has written this? So Abhay Charan put his hand up. And the teacher said, yes. He said, this is very good. This is excellent. So he came to the class just to tell him and encourage him that you're a very good English writer. And then Prabhupada also added that he studied Sanskrit and he was the top of the class in his Sanskrit studies. Somebody asked me this recently, where did he learn the Sanskrit? Was it at Scottish Churches College or some other place? I honestly don't know, but it would be something that we could, look up and try and research. But so Prabhupada was an expert English writer, English prose. He was top of his class in Sanskrit. So he had all the faculties with him that he needed to go and do this work. He was an expert musician, played the mridanga like nobody's business. He was completely expert on the harmonium. He could cook anything you like. He said that was from my early childhood. He said, I always liked to serve out. I never liked to eat, but I enjoyed cooking and I would learn from my mother. And he said, distribution of prasadam, that was one of his main programs. So Prabhupada had all these qualities that were needed. And so when he came to the West, Krishna immediately then, put him to good use. So here we go. We were back on. Well, yeah. So this is the power of attorney to buy the first strip of land in Mayapur. Next. Now, one other source of books that we got was from Sauri Prabhu. You can see there, that's Sauri Prabhu. He had a PhD in mathematics. He was one of the founding members of the Bhaktivedanta Institute, or the BI. This picture was taken in 1976. Prabhupada went to Washington, saw all the members of the BI, that's Bhakti Swarup Damodar Maharaj, Sadaputa, Rupanuga and Madhava. They were the core team for scientific preaching. So Prabhupada met with them every day for about a week whilst we were in Washington, and gave them ideas about how to do the science preaching. So Sadaputa unfortunately left us in 2008, I think. Yes, 2008. So we got in touch with his wife, widow, and he had a personal collection of books, reference books, stuff that he'd written himself. So she gave us everything from Sadaputa's archive. So we have his personal archive. Next one. Because he was the one that managed to figure out how to fulfill Prabhupada's desire to have a planetarium based on the 5th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam. For a long time, nobody wanted to talk about it after Prabhupada disappeared, because nobody thought that it could be done. It's one of those sections of the Bhagavatam which is very, very difficult to decipher. So even Swarup Damodar Maharaj, back to Swarup Damodar, he told me personally that he went to Prabhupada in mid-1977, which was just at the time when Prabhupada was pushing the devotees to find literature, find maps, find something so that they could start work on the TOVP. So Bhakti Swarup Damodar Maharaj, he went to Prabhupada and he said that he honestly didn't think that it could be done in our lifetime, and that a future generation they would have to study it and figure it out. So Sadaputa, who was part of the BI, he was a mathematician, so he decided, because they fragmented and split up, so one of the things that he did was to sit down and study all the astronomical literature in the Bhagavatam. And by 1989, this book was published, Vedic Cosmography and Astronomy. When we read that, then we felt that now we can go ahead with the building, because at least now we've got some idea about Vedic astronomy. So it's a very important development with Sadaputa. It's a great loss to our society that he's not with us anymore. Next. So this is Sadaputa's personal archive. It was shipped to us from Florida. Yeah, next. And Krishna Kanta Prabhu, Krishna Kirtan or Krishna Kanta? Krishna Kirtan. He was Sadaputa's assistant for many, many years. So he kindly came to the BRC. He went through all the papers and books that we got from Sadaputa's widow, and we made a whole section just on his books. Yeah. This is all the different papers that he had. Yeah. Other people, we got about 75% of all the Back to Godhead magazines. Mother Ormila, she gave us her whole collection. There's a few Back to Godheads there from the late 60s, etc. Yeah. Now for the future, of course, with all this literature, we're not just going to sit on it and hide it away. There are a couple of other libraries run by several Gaudiya mats. and they have partial collections, but they don't do anything with it. It's just sitting there rotting on the shelves. If you go there and ask them, can I, do some study on this book or that book, they won't do it. Or you have to stay there all day and do it with their supervision. So we thought when we conceived of the library that we should just get all the material and make it, free. So anybody can go. You can go online. You can go there physically. Anybody is welcome, and you can do your research. We wanted to make sure that the written literature was not lost, and the best way to ensure that is to print as many copies as you can, so something will come through. So we had an idea, and one academic publisher, BRC Press, and then also a general publishing of Vaishnava literature. So that will be the BRC Press and the Vaishnava Literature Press, one for the scholars and one for the regular devotees. We were going to do Saraswati Jai Shri, which is in Bengali, and Sambhidananda is worth a mention. He's one of the three that was sent to London in 1933, but he was not sent there for the general preaching as Bon Maharaj and Bhakti Pradeep Tirtha were. He was a scholar. He was a young man, and I think he was only like 23 or 24 when he went to England. And Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati instructed him to get acceptance into London University and do his PhD on Gaudiya Vaishnavism. He was accepted as a candidate. In 1.5 years, he did his entire thesis, 800 pages, on the whole, every aspect of Gaudiya Vaishnavism. And then he came back to him, so in 1.5 years. So he's very important. We have a copy of his thesis, and somebody at some point will use it, of course. So anyway, we estimate about 50% of Bhaktivinoda Thakur and Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati's works are still not translated into English. So that's a project that's being worked on now. They're gradually getting into starting to present the various works into the English language, and then they'll go out all over the world. Next one. Now this was a completely unexpected fight. We had never heard from anybody that Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati had a personal diary, but we found this manuscript in the collection of what's his name, Sundar Ananda, and it starts at 1904. So at that time, that was just when Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati was in Mayapur, or just before he went there, and it runs all the way through to 1936, and about 1/4 of it is handwritten, and then the rest of it was typed up by, we presume, Sundarananda Vijayavinod. But it's like a complete personal diary of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. It's not the kind of diary where you get some revelation and write down your thoughts. This is much more like, on this day we went to see this person, he promised to supply this and that. Then the next day there was a pandal at such and such. So it's more like a travel log in some respects, but still it gives us an insight into the effort and time that was put in by Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati to start the preaching movement. Now that has been translated by Pranava Prabhu. It's with him in Sweden at the moment, and he's been putting annotations to all the sections that are in that diary, because there's a lot of names and places that people wouldn't know about. So Pranava's been annotating, he's been adding in, further information, so you get a better understanding. He hasn't published it yet, but I hope it will come out at some point. Next one. So another part, what we've seen so far is the books, preservation of the books and identification of the various literatures. But I also wanted to start some kind of a manuscript mission Indian government actually has a manuscript mission, and in the early, the early 1980s, our devotees got a grant from the Smithsonian Institute in America to go around India and microfilm as many. I'm not sure whether it was just general literature or whether it was specific to Gaudiya Vaishnavism, but they got a grant and they spent 1 or 2 years touring around India, taking microfiche images of various manuscripts. So that only lasted a couple of years. They lost the support of the Smithsonian, and nothing was going on for about 15 years. So I thought, well, we're setting up a library, so why don't we take up this manuscript mission of our own? Because in Bengal and Orissa, there are literally tens of thousands of handwritten manuscripts. So there's got to be some value in all of that. So that's what we decided to do. So in 2012, I think, 2011, we started this program. So when this was made, after 5 years, we've been to 60 temples and libraries, and we had collected about 2,000 manuscripts. And we had a portable scanner a lot of the time, so we could do it all on the spot. Next one. So these are the kinds of things that you find. There's tree bark, there's palm leaf, and there's handmade paper. One reason why this is important is this manuscript that you see here was found floating in the Ganges. So there'd been a flood. Somebody's manuscript collection, flowed out the door, and somebody found it in the Ganges. So it was still readable, so they gave it to us at the library. And you can see this one here, been very badly attacked by bugs. So nobody's looking after the manuscripts anymore. Many of the libraries that we go to are run by the government. The people that run them, even if they want to do something, they don't have the backing or financial assistance that they need to get scanners, to hire people to come and make copies of all the literatures. So we were offering them that service. We've got Bharati Roy, she's 73 now, but she knows, she's a scholar. She's been working with the BRC for 9 years now. She knows a lot of these librarians. So she goes around and persuades them to let us come there with a scanner and copy everything. And after some initial resistance, once we started doing it, we could show to other libraries that this is what we've done in that library and that library, and so they would welcome it. So that's how we got in. So that's been going on for some time. It will continue to go on. Yeah. This is a few manuscripts that have been, physical manuscripts that have been donated. That red cloth keeps the bugs and insects from eating the contents, not because it's bad to taste, but apparently we were told the red color is what, the bugs don't like the color, the red color. It's not because of their eating it, it's just the color of it. Anyway, next one. This is a handwritten copy. This was in Sundar Ananda's collection of the Madhya Leela of the Chaitanya Charitamrita. We think it's about 200 or 250 years old. So the whole Madhya Leela is there. Next. This is Sudhir Goswami from the Gauranga Tal Mandir in Navadvip. So famous deity in Navadvip. You see that box there? That's a wooden box. In that wooden box there's a manuscript. They keep it on the altar. In that manuscript, this is Ashish. He does all the photography and scanning. Sudhir Goswami's got that book there, that manuscript. And what it is the 10th canto, handwritten by Gadadhar Pandit. And they say, go on next one, You see here, these are the manuscripts. So there's about 73 or 74 plates. On the bottom one there, you can see the regular handwriting. But then there's a line at the top, at the end, and at the bottom. So they say that that annotation is by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu himself. That's his handwriting. So, as I say, these people have these things, but they don't know what to do with them. So he immediately agreed, yes, please come and scan everything. Yeah. This is what happens when you don't look after them. He took this photograph in a government library in Navadvip. This is how they look after everything. So this is obviously an inspiration for us to go on and get as much as we can whilst they're still there. Next. So this is Ashish. He's not a Vaishnav. We just hired him, but he knew something about photography. We paid to have him attend several seminars on archival workings and how to run a library and stuff like that. He's been a very steady man for the last 8 or 9 years. This is Bharati Roy. She is actually an initiated Vaishnava, but not in our line. So although she's about 73 now, so she's getting to a point where she can't run around anymore. But she got us into so many temples and libraries, very important part of the team, yeah. One place that they went to, I figured that Bengal, of course, is not just Bengal and Bangladesh, it was all one place previously. So in Sylhet, in, when was this, 2012, I think, Bharati went there. Sylhet is the area where Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's father was born. So they went there just kind of to see if there was anything worth finding. They found this Ishwara Patsala in Sylhet. This was built in the 1930s. The gentleman that built it made a huge library. Yeah, next one. They have a manuscript section, but you can see this is what they do with them. Nobody knows, or nobody has the time or the interest to see what these manuscripts have got written on them. So they're just left out in the open, covered in dust and bugs and whatever else. He estimated there was about 9,000 manuscripts there. So they were initially happy at our offer that we would come there to Bangladesh and we'd sit down, we'd catalogue everything, and then we'll photograph it all. We'll give you copies, so you've got the originals as well. So initially they said, yes, please come as soon as you can. But then when Bharati got back to Calcutta and we wrote to them, they didn't reply. And she's written to them several times, and every time they keep putting us off. So some politics at play there somewhere. But again, you know, look what there is there. Now, of course, these manuscripts are not just philosophy. There's, I mean, even parts of the philosophy, it's not pure Gaudiya Vaishnavism. There's stuff by the Sahajas and other deviant groups. There's legal documents, you know, land ownership and stuff like that. So there's a lot of mundane stuff, but there's a lot of really spiritual stuff in there as well. So that's what we've been looking after. This is another place that we went to, Odisha, in Udaipur. They've got 17,000 manuscripts and 40,000 books and a huge number of old journals. Again, half the content of the library had been treated, but the rest of it was just rotting away. So we found this was the situation in many places. So we really want to keep this manuscript mission going so we can save all this valuable literature. This place is the Navadvip Sadharan Granthagara. It was established in 1907. It was formerly known as the Edward VII Anglo Sanskrit Library. So it sounds very promising, but unfortunately when you go in there, they don't have anything anymore. They were interested in throwing out the old books and bringing in computers so the kids can come and play computer games. This is the, government library. Let's have a look. So this is what we found. They collected all the manuscripts that they had. And this was a place that Western scholars used to come to regularly to do research work. But since the mid-1940s, nobody's bothered going there anymore. A lot of stuff has been stolen. But they still had 6 almirahs of manuscripts. So they did initially allow us to come there and make a catalogue. And then we were doing the preservation on their property with 2 people from their side and 2 people from our side. This is the condition. Again, this is the way the library is looking after the literature. Next. So this is Bharati and her husband, and this is the 2 from the library. He was the head librarian, I forget his name, but very helpful. But then because of, again, politics in the Navadvip area, when the local director of librarians, or whatever they call them, the DL, he found out that ISKCON was working in this library. Oh, kick them out. So they immediately stopped because we're ISKCON. So that half of that collection has been done. The other half, we're still working on trying to get back in there. Another source of valuable literature has come from private ownership. There's one lady professor from this Mitra family. She's a professor in America. So she heard in America what we were doing in Calcutta. She's from Calcutta. And so she rang up her brother and told him, go around and see what they're doing. This is very important. So he came. This is their lineage. The family's been in Calcutta for over 250 years. They've got the whole lineage down there in a really thick book. Everybody's mentioned. They were a very important family at one point. Originally they were in Ayodhya. They were driven out from there, so they went to Mathura. Then the British came and drove them out from Mathura, so they ended up in Bengal, in what is now Calcutta. But there's one whole area in Calcutta. They have a temple, they've got their original deities, they've got a library, and quite a bit of land. Next. So the original patriarch was Raja Pitamba Mitra. He was the one that came from Ayodhya. Yeah. One of his descendants is Rajendra Lal Mitra. So you can see 1824 to 1891. He was the first Indian president of the Asiatic Society. He helped to run that for 30 years. So he was quite an important figure, in the among scholars. By running the Asiatic Society, he was well known. So you would think with this kind of lineage that, they would know what to do or have a concern of what to do with their books and manuscripts. So anyway, this is Swarup Mitra. He's the brother of the lady scholar in America. So he came around and he said, my sister told me to contact you. I don't know what you'd like to see. So we explained everything. Krishna Chetra Maharaj was there when he visited, so we went together with Pranava, and we were amazed at the setup. They got this huge house. It's typically British construction, but it's like the joint family, many generations living in the same buildings. Now nobody lives there anymore. Swarup Mitra, although he's very friendly, and his parents are disciples or were disciples of Bon Maharaj, but he himself can't follow the practice, so because he likes to eat meat sometimes. So his own mother threw him out the building. He lives in a flat down the road. She won't let him in. Anyway, this is the original building, typical colonial, Next. This is the outside entrance, next to the temple. And in the temple, they've got deities of Shri Shri Revati Balarama. These deities have been worshipped by the family for over 300 years. They came from Ayodhya to Mathura to Calcutta. They still have big festivals and they're nicely looked after. So that was encouraging. And this is their library. So with such a lineage, they know the importance, but still they don't know what to do with it. So that's why they called us. We went there. There's about 80 manuscripts there. So we cleaned them all up. We scanned them all, made a catalogue, gave them back the originals, and the copies are in our library. Yeah. This is a sample there Bharat is looking at. So many wonderful literatures. And these are genuine Gaudiya Vaishnava literatures. Next. Another source we got, this gentleman, is Sanjay Goswami from Brindavan. And of course we all know that when Prabhupada first started ISKCON in Brindavan, we had a lot of opposition from the Goswamis. But this Goswami, he saw what we were, and he found out that we had an international school in Mayapur. So he sent his 2 teenage daughters to Mayapur to do their studies in our school. So he's very friendly with ISKCON. So I met with him, and he told me that they had some manuscripts from 300 or 400 years ago. And their temple is this Radha Madan Gopal temple, which is just as you come into Loy Bazaar. It's a little old building. You have to really look for it to find it. But inside, they've got all these literatures, manuscripts. So he actually gave us the whole family collection. There's a complete edition, handwritten, of the Chaitanya Charitamrita from about 1760. So very valuable stuff. So he told us, we'll bring the manuscripts to you in Calcutta. You can preserve them and photograph them. This is another sample here. And then we'll, give us back the originals. So we were happy with that one. Next one. So the topic of today's celebrations, Birnaga, the birthplace of Srila Bhaktivedanta Thakur. So this also was like a miracle that we got in here. Yeah, go ahead. This is the temple. So they kind of renovated some of it. There's the Radha Govinda deities on the top level there. Lalit Prasad used to live in the bottom quarters here. Next one. And these are the Shiva temples that I mentioned before. Each one has a Shiva lingam about 2.5 feet high. All of them were sent to a place in Shantipur except one. So I guess that he's there as the Dharmapal, to look after things. You don't get into Vaikuntha unless Lord Shiva agrees. So but these buildings were actually constructed in 1818, 200 years ago. That was when Bhaktivedanta Thakur's family, they were all Shaktas. They were worshipping Kali and Durga. So this is the Kali temple. It stands at the side of the other building. They've been renovating that one. They intend to install Lord Jagannath in that building. Next one. This is Bharati. This gentleman here is the one that I told you about last night. He organized this Harinam Sankirtan in Birnaga. So I went with him, and he's the one that took me in to Bhaktivedanta Thakur's birth site. Very nice man. And he's a disciple in the line of Lalit Prasad. So this is the actual birth site of Bhaktivedanta Thakur. For some years, the control of the land had been taken away from the family, but Lalit Prasad was able to persuade the authorities to at least get some of the land back. So they got it back. Bhaktivedanta Thakur showed his son Lalit Prasad exactly where he was born, and this temple was built there. Yeah, next. So this is 72. Prabhupada just was gearing up to start his preaching in India. So one of the things he wanted to do was to see if we could do something at Bhaktivedanta Thakur's birth site. So he went there. There's Shyama Sundar from San Francisco and Guru Das. This is Lalit Prasad Thakur. He was 92 at this time. And of course Srila Prabhupada. And they discussed the possibility of ISKCON doing some development on their land. And they have about 5 acres of land. So the buildings that they already have are on one side, and the other side of the land is vacant. So Prabhupada proposed, give us a lease, or give the land, let us do something, it'll be good for you. All the foreign devotees will come to see Bhaktivinoda Thakur's place. Automatically they'll give donations and money. You won't have to worry about funding or anything. And ISKCON will be there also, because some local villages, they've made a false claim on some of the land, and so they've had to go to court to try and get that back, and that's very expensive. Next one. So they talked, and the next day Prabhupada sent this letter to Lalit Prasad Thakur, and he praises him first of all. Personally, I'm so much encouraged by you. I appreciate this is the blessings of Bhaktivinoda Thakur through his living representative. That's Prabhupada writing to his guru's brother. Now you can expedite the lease agreement immediately. So that was what Prabhupada was after. It looked like they were going to take us up on it. And Prabhupada is saying, I may advise my assistants to come and take up the work seriously and begin construction. Unfortunately, the next one, the committee that was running the place didn't want to cooperate, despite the fact that Lalit Prasad was actually favorable to it. But at the time anyway, Prabhupada got another letter from Achyutananda in 1972, a couple of months later from that picture. And Achyutananda had informed Prabhupada that the original library of Bhaktivinoda Thakur was there and it was rotting away. So this is Prabhupada's response. Yadabara should go there immediately for photographing all of the manuscripts, page by page, very completely, before it is too late. The pages are in a very decrepit condition. They may be preserved for future generations of Vaishnavas to see the actual handwriting and words of such great saintly persons. Treat this matter very seriously and thoroughly, and take all precautions to protect this wonderful boon of literature forever. So I had been doing some research when we first started the library, and I came across these letters. I'd never seen them before. So that really kind of fired us up. Here's a direct statement from Prabhupada to get the manuscripts, look after them, keep them so people in the future will see them. So it's a direct order. So that was another, impetus for us, apart from the fact that Prabhupada had told Nitai to start a library in Bombay in 1976. So I was thinking how to get there. Everybody's saying, they're not friendly, they don't like ISKCON, and you'll never get in. But then I got this opportunity to take a bus ride, and we ended up meeting, and it was wonderful. They were very friendly and very happy that we'd come. And then I suggested that they give us all the literature so that we can make copies and preserve them, and then we'll give you the originals back. So these items are very, very priceless and are a great treasure house of Vaishnava law. So be very careful and take all precautions to guard them. So we did that, yeah. So this is from 72. Yadabara immediately went there on Prabhupada's suggestion. He took photographs of about, how many? I forget now how many you said. Anyways, 700 or 800 photographs of different manuscripts. But the main manuscripts were not photographed. He left after 1 week and went back to Bombay. So these are now in the Bhaktivedanta archives, because I wrote to them when I found out that Yadabara had taken photographs, but we didn't know where they were. So I wrote to the BBT, and they said that yes, we had them, we still have them, but they've been given to Prabhupada's Bhaktivedanta archives. So I wrote to Ekanath there. He said, yes, we've still got them. They'd looked after them. And this is Bamsidas Babaji. He's the one that first greeted me when I went there. Nice man. And so we went to visit there in January of 2013. In the background there's some pictures of Lalit Prasad's mother and some other saintly lady. So they keep some kind of good condition, but they don't have much money, so it's very hard to keep everything going. Next. So after the tour, that was when I asked him, do you have, I heard you have some original handwritten stuff of Bhaktivedanta Thakur. Is there something I could see? So he, took him a second, and then he said, okay. So he went off. He came back 5 minutes later with this book, and initially he told me that it was a handwritten copy of the Chaitanya Charitamrita. Then he looked at it more closely and he said, oh no, it's actually the Chaitanya Bhagavad. So that tells you how much the custodians of the library actually were aware of what was in their own library. He didn't even know what the book was. And you can see it was falling apart, all the pages are split, and when the chemicals attack the paper, it goes brown, and then it stiffens up and just falls apart. So that was when I told him, I said that, something should be done. Otherwise, in 30 or 40 years, none of this literature will be available anymore. So that led to him, saying that he'd like to cooperate with us. We did that. We went back to Calcutta. We sent the taxi. They brought him to see the collection in the library. They immediately agreed. The next day we were there. We put all the literatures in a box, brought them to the library, and it took us about 2 years to do the preservation and copying and scanning and everything, and then rebinding. But we did do it, and we got all the literature that they had. And that's a close-up of this same book there. You can see there's some written comments and annotations by Bhaktivedanta. Yeah. So this is when Babadi Maharaj came to the BRC. You look on the computer screen there. There's his guru, Lalit Prasad. There's Prabhupada, and there's Achyutananda and Gurudas. So we sat him down. We showed him. We have 6 photographs from that visit. That was 72. He joined Lalit Prasad and got initiated in 73. So we were a little ahead of him, by age and experience. So anyway, he was dazzled by what we were doing. There's a corner of our scanner there. So he immediately agreed, So I know how things run a little bit in India. So I said, okay, look, get your committee. I knew they had a committee. I said, gather up all your committee members, tell them what we're doing. If we get an okay from the whole committee, then we'll do it. I didn't want to get in a fight, just deal with him, then later on the other members. So in April of 2014, we went there to visit the committee members. That's most of them. And I showed them this slideshow that I've been showing you tonight, what we're doing. So they were all very impressed. I had my computer on a little chair opposite. And at the end of it, what I thought was, they'll say, okay, thank you very much. Now we need to discuss what we'll do. We'll get in touch with you in a few weeks. And maybe they'll change their mind. But I was surprised that they immediately agreed. And I had prepared for that. That piece of paper there was a written agreement. And I thought, well, maybe they might respond quickly, just in case. So I took that and the rubber stamps. And as soon as they saw the presentation, they said, yes, we've got to do this. So I said, all right, here's the agreement, stamp it. So they did that same day. Definitely Krishna's arrangement, yeah. So apart from their collection, this is most of their collection, about 181 works, different manuscripts, books and letters. So this is what we received from them. First thing we did was catalogue them, yeah. This was one wonderful surprise. This letter, written in Bengali, was from Srila Prabhupada to Lalit Prasad Thakur in 1971. This was before he went there in 72 to try and get some land And he wrote, for some reason, he wrote to Lalit Prasad. And this is during Prabhupada's stay in Moscow. So Prabhupada wrote this whilst he was in Russia and sent it to Lalit Prasad Thakur. And it gives a description of what he's intending to do in Moscow. He had a list of 3 items. Let's see, I think it's in English. There, so this is the letter, 21st of June, 71. My dear uncle Prabhupada Lalit Prasad Thakur. Prabhupada is very respectful. Accept my obeisances at your lotus feet. At present, I'm staying at the above-mentioned hotel in Moscow, room number 356. With me, there are 2 American disciples. So here the preaching topic will be Vedic conception of communism, knowledge derived from authoritative tradition, parampara, and 3, scientific classless society. Now, with your blessings in this severely atheistic country, the teachings of Srimad Mahaprabhu will be preached. So that was the letter that Prabhupada sent back. There are many, he says here, there are many local and foreigner boys and girls that have visited me. I advise them to do bhajan of the Lord. A few boys of this place have become very impressed after listening to our Harinam and want to join us. But the laws of this country are so tough that they cannot go against them. Here, discussions are going on to meet many reputable professors, and there'll be an arrangement of lecture in the Indian embassy. You bless me. Actually, that fell through, and Prabhupada ended up spending 4 or 5 days sitting in a hotel room with nothing to do, apparently. But what happened was that Shama Sundar Prabhu, because there was no food available, they couldn't find any vegetables, so he was roaming around trying to find a food store. These 2 boys saw him, and they came up, and they both spoke English. And one of them was the son of the Indian ambassador, and the other one was a Russian friend of his, Anatoly. So they asked Shama Sundar that, do you have any, denim jeans? So they said no. He said no. And then they asked, do you have anything of the Beatles records? So that was it. Shama Sundar told him, he said, we don't have any records, but my guru is the guru of George Harrison. Right? So as soon as they heard that, he said, why don't you come and speak to him? He's just here in the hotel. So they came in, and for 3 days, Prabhupada preached to Anatoly, and he initiated him. He taught him all the basic philosophy, Bhagavad Gita. They managed to bring 1 Bhagavad Gita into the country through the immigration. And so they gave him that. And that was it. Prabhupada flew out, and he was left on his own. This is him, Anatoly. That's Prabhupada in Red Square. And he started preaching. And he took Krishna Consciousness all over the Soviet Union. Eventually, of course, they captured him. He was tortured. He was put in a mental asylum. He was pumped full of drugs, psychedelic drugs. He kind of drifted away later on for a while. But by that time, it was too late. In like a needle, out like a plow. Prabhupada got in there, right? 1 person, just the 1 person that he spoke to, and the Krishna Consciousness movement spread like anything all over Russia. So he's the one to thank for that, and Prabhupada, of course. He left his body in 2013. They built a little samadhi for him in Brindavan. You can see that. Ananta Shanti, Prabhupada's initiating name given to him. So that was nice. Next. So back to the BRC. This is the Biyanaga collection. We did find 1 work that has not been published, handwritten by Bhaktivedanta Thakur, called the Rasa Rasodaya. So we'd like to publish that. Unfortunately, somebody had been there previously with a lamination machine, but they used the wrong kind of laminate. They used plastic. So they laminated some of the documents, and what happened was that the plastic started to shrink and destroy the contents. So there's some parts of it that you can't read anymore. But anyway, again, this is a group of people that know the value of the philosophy, they know the value of the books and manuscripts. This is how they deal with it. Next. Now this, of course, is one of the most important documents that we have, Bhaktivedanta Thakur's autobiography. So we were very pleased that they let us take that and copy it, the Swalikita Jivani. So you can see, again, it's falling apart. This is Bhaktivedanta Thakur's account of his own life. I mean, you can't get much more valuable than that. And yet, they've let it rot away with all the bugs. You can see here, Kedarnath Dutt, and that's 1895, I think. February 95. So that's 1895, 16th of February. Yeah, next one. This is the next page. He's got his own black and white photo stuck in it. Again, this is the following year. He puts his name and signed it. Yeah. And this is the first page of the text. Of course, you're doing a biography. At least in India, everybody knows when you do a biography, the first thing that you do is look at the natal chart, and you look at all the auspicious or inauspicious, movements of the planets, and then you base your biography partly on that. So this is the natal chart of Bhaktivedanta Thakur, as written by himself. Yeah. So all of those things, then, as I say, we scanned them, we laminated them. And we also had a method of encapsulation and engraving. Next. So this is what happens when you don't look after them. This is a couple of pages of the Nadia Prakash. They just all fell apart. So that was the task, try to put all that stuff back together and photograph it. Yeah, and that is the Nadia Prakash. So we... at the time, we didn't have any decent scanning facility. Then we found one company in Delhi that was importing German machines. We bought one. We got help from the GBC BBT team. They have a certain amount of money every year that they can give out to science projects. So Devan Rita Maharaj, he asked me, is this a science project? So I said, sure, of course it is. Science of Vaishnavism. So he was on the committee, and they gave us $12,000 to help buy that scanning machine. It cost $27,000 altogether, and the rest of the money I had to collect by going on tour. But we got the machine, it's still there, we use it every day, all day, and it's a very professional standard. Yeah. Ashish is our scan man and photographer. So that's you can see the size of the scanning machine there. Yeah. And this is some of the volumes of the Nadia Prakash. There were 31 volumes as thick as this. And so each page was stripped out. We treated it with chemicals. Then we laminated it, yeah. You can see here, after deacidifying the paper, we laminated using this very fine tissue paper, which was non-acidic. And all 31 volumes, it took about 10 months to do every single page of those volumes. Yeah, next. And then a brief catalogue was made by Bharati and her husband there. Yeah. And this was after each batch was rebound, 60 volumes. So we just got them back from the print publishing shop. So that's just the Nadia Prakash. Yeah. This is a little bit about how to deacidify. Yeah. One thing you've got to be careful with is that if you laminate a piece of work, if the ink is not fast, then it spreads all over and spoils it. So we had to be careful if it was too alkaline or too acidic, then we had to change. So, next. So this is the pages of the Nadia Prakash, laminated. And now that means that the lamination is see-through, so you can read it without any trouble, and you can handle the pages without, putting any acid from your hands on it, or without tearing it, or whatever. Yeah. This is the hand-binding machine that they used to bind all the manuscripts. Yeah. And this is all the Biyanaga stuff. So after a couple of years, we'd done everything we could to preserve that, got it rebound. That's all back in the Biyanaga temple now. But we have copies of all of that. Yeah. Encapsulation. This is, instead of lamination, you make like a pocket and you can bring the contents in or out. It's preferable to the lamination, but because nobody in India does this kind of encapsulation, we had to stick with what was local. Yeah. So when we were ready to give the literature back, these are the main figures in the Bhaktivedanta Goshti committee running the temple in Biyanaga. This is Niranjan Binod Roy. That's Vamsidas Babaji Maharaj. This is Mr. Roy's wife, and this is another Babaji from there. So they came to the BRC. We sat down and discussed with them about, keeping everything intact. Mr. Roy was so impressed with the library and the work that we'd done. He had his own private collection, so he said that you can bring those also and do the same with my books. So we collected all of his books from his house. I forget how many there are, maybe about 80. And again, we found some really surprising, valuable literature. Next. This is various editions of the Gaudiya Panjika that he'd saved up from the 1920s. Next. Now, these two postcards, one of them is from 1916. So Mr. Roy's grandfather used to correspond with Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. So in 1916, he sent one postcard, and then 1918, he sent another one. Now, the 1918 was signed Vaishnava Dasanu Dasa, Akinchana Shri Bhimo Prasad Siddhanta Saraswati. He had a long moniker. Just next one. This letter is the 1918 one, and this is from Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati to Mr. Roy's relative. So it's very important, this, because it says in the beginning of the month of Jaista, this is 1918, we will go to Daulatpur Prapanashram. There, staying a few days, I have to read and analyze Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita and the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. So that's the work that he was doing. You may have heard that in the last birth ceremony time that means Gaur Purnima, I have taken Tridanda. So this is Bhaktisiddhanta, after he gave himself sannyas, writing to his friend, you may have heard that now I'm a sannyasi. And this was the beginning of the Gaudiya Math. So now you've been graceful all the time to this worthless fellow, so I can spend the rest of my life doing the service of Sri Gaurasundara. I hope you are doing Harinam. If you get time to come to Daulatpur, I may be grateful by seeing you. And his signature changes because now he's gone from one ashram to the other. So now he signs Sri Harijan Kinkara, Tridandi Bhikshu Sri Siddhanta Saraswati. So this, again, it's a scrap of paper, but this is history. This is the whole history of the Gaudiya Vaishnava. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati saying, I just took sannyas. All right, next one. Okay, Ravanari Das, Prabhupada's only disciple from Palestine. Yeah, he was at one point in the Middle East. He joined up with the what was that, Palestinian Liberation Front, something like that. But he didn't like it. He left Palestine once the country, when he was born, I think it was 1947 or 46, that Palestine was his actual own country, and he had a Palestinian passport. But a couple of years later, the UN gave that land, they drove off the Palestinians and gave the land to the Jews. So Israel was formed. So he was born a couple of years just before that in Palestine. So they had to get out. So he spent a lot of time in Germany. He met the devotees there. He got initiated by Prabhupada, I think in 1974. And he began translating Prabhupada's books into Arabic. So he did do the Bhagavad Gita. Now this is another literature that he gave us. It was by this fellow Nat Sahib Madan Devlavi. Yeah. And this is an illustrated Gita in Urdu. I have no idea what this all means. We have to find some Urdu scholar to tell us, but it's got about half a dozen of these maps. So it's a wonderful publication. So Ravanari Prabhu gave that to the library. Yeah. Okay, so one thing that we tried to do was develop a more permanent way of preserving all the literature. So I was hoping that we would be able to make a scan of the pages, and I bought this digital engraver, and it kind of burns into the surface of whatever material that you want to mark. So I was hoping that we could find something, some paper that was thick enough that we could burn the image of the scanned manuscripts and keep that, more secure. Unfortunately, by this time, I had kind of slowed down because of the various problems I was having with my health, and we never really used this machine. But it's still there, I think, and could be used if somebody wants to learn how to do it. But when you're doing preservation work, you have to try to think. Some systems like the Christians used, the stuff that they did the preservation work on will last up to 1,000 years. And it's made from the skin of cows. They scrub it back and then they burn the literature, the words into the skin. And those manuscripts last hundreds and thousands of years. So I wanted to do something like that. I guess it's something that somebody in the future will have to take up next. But this is what you can do. That same engraver, this is on glass. This one is terracotta or something. This one is marble, and this is steel. So you can burn in very accurately any image that you want into practically any medium that you want. Yeah. So here we've got Binodananda Das. He is the son, the youngest son of Sundarananda Vijayavinod. So after Bodhian Maharaj had given Sundarananda's collection to ISKCON, this Babaji here, he was the one who was friends with the family, and he was very upset because Bodhian Maharaj waited until he'd gone off to pilgrimage to Brindavan, because he knew that he would never agree to hand the books over. So Bodhian Maharaj let him go on pilgrimage to Kartik in Brindavan. And as soon as he did that, then he gave us the books. So when he came back, he was quite upset because he was the custodian of the library and it had just been given away. But because his acharya, did it, he couldn't really say anything. So he tried a little bit of stirring in the background, and he went to see the family, and he told them that maybe they've sold, you gave it for free, and maybe they've sold it to ISKCON now, and this and that. So to calm things down, I invited I forget his name, Krishna Das Babaji or something. I invited him to come with me to the house of Sundarananda, and we'll sit with with his son, and we'll explain how everything works. So he did that, and once we showed him what we were doing, I had a fold-out thing with pictures, and he saw how, well, he knew the necessity of it. I mean, he'd been keeping this library for about 70 years in his house, so he knew the value of it, but he was very pleased when we showed him what we were doing, and that was it, tension was relieved. I don't know whether he's still alive. This was taken about 5 years ago, but he was a very, very nice man and very friendly, yeah. These are some comments that we've had. This is a comment by Binodananda Das. Actually, he told me, he said that he was born in 1929, and Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati had actually given him his name. Yeah, it was very nice. So, son of Sundarananda Vijay. So he gave a letter. The BRC library, what's that? I visited today. They keep my father's collection very, very nicely. I like it very much. Yeah, next one. We've had parties come through. This is a group from Delhi on their way to Mayapur, checking everything out. Yeah. Pradyumna Prabhu came over from America and spent 1 month going through everything. Yeah. This is Satya Narayan Prabhu. He's the BBT trustee for the Middle East and Thailand, Malaysia, all that area. So he's given some small donations to help us keep going. Yeah. This is B.B. Muni Maharaj. He's from the Chaitanya Gaudiya Mat. They're actually just down the road from the BRC. They're just near Kalighat. So we went over to see their collection. We showed them what we have. We did a deal with them that we, could make scanned copies of whatever they have, and they could have copies of whatever we have. So we're building some working relationships between ISKCON and the Gaudiya Mat members. Yeah. This is the GBC. Again, I made this same presentation to them. They really appreciated what we're doing. Most devotees in ISKCON don't have much idea about this level of preaching, with the libraries and scholars and whatever. So we showed them the whole thing. The next page, you can see Naranjan Maharaj there. He was amazed by what we'd done. He immediately gave me a donation of $2,500. So they've been supporting us quite nicely. Yeah. Various visitors, Smita Krishna Maharaj. We've got a patrons program. You give $2,500 a year. So Smita Krishna Maharaj from Sweden, he's one of our regular donors. Yeah. Bhakti Charu Maharaj gave 5 lakhs when we first began the project. Yeah. This is an American professor, Rebecca Manring. She was not favorable to ISKCON, and she's also considered to be the leading scholar on Gaudiya Vaishnavism in America. So it just happened when Pranava was in Calcutta, she was also in Calcutta supervising some students that were learning Sanskrit and Bengali. So Pranava knew her, and he invited her over to the library because he was hoping that somehow or another she wouldn't realize it was an ISKCON project. But he said as soon as they got out of the taxi and went through the front gate, 2 devotees, with tilak and dhotis, came out of the building, and there's a Haribol Pranava. So she knew. But when she saw the literature, she was really amazed. So you can see she's smiling there. So she's become actually very favorable to ISKCON because of this project. Next one. Okay, so this is our website. It probably doesn't look like this anymore. The new team that's come in for the management have just redone the whole website, so I'm not sure exactly what's on it anymore. But the plan was, as I say, to everything, get it all scanned, and as it gets scanned, load it up onto the internet, then anybody can log in, do a search, pull out the literature that they want. That way then things will be spread. So, yeah. So these are examples when you get up. This is one manuscript of the Prem Bhakti Chandrika. Yeah. And this is a tutor's collection, or part of it. So once we got settled in, we let him put some of his books up on the shelf. So this is the next phase. We want to double the library size to at least 6,000 books. Yeah. And we want to get more scanners. We've renovated another room upstairs, so that's like $40,000. So that was what I was working on a couple of years ago before I stopped traveling, was to raise this money to keep everything going. Yeah. We also, in the same building, we built some new offices on the ground floor for the staff. Yeah. We have a guest house with 6 or 7 rooms in it, because Pranava told me that when he was doing his research, he would come once a year for a month to Calcutta, but he could never find anywhere to stay where he could do his work. The ISKCON guest house was always noisy, so he ended up renting a room from the Krishna Mission, reluctantly, but he had to do it. So I was thinking, all right, we're building a new library, we want scholars to come. We should provide the facility for them to stay in the building. So half of the building was just empty, so I converted it all into nice guest rooms. And we have scholars staying there a lot of the time. Next. So for the future, more book acquisition, Manuscript Mission we want to keep going, scanning and preservation, website construction and maintenance, translation and publications. Now we can add to that the plan to build Mayapur University. The Mayapur authorities have given us 26 acres of land just around here, and we're going to build a university eventually. And that will, of course, work in tandem with the BRC in Calcutta. Next. So this is just an idea to do something that looks impressive and keeps the same kind of architectural style as the temple of the Vedic Planetarium. Next one. So this is where I usually pitch for help, but we don't need that now tonight. But that's the state of the BRC up to 2 years ago. There's been a lot of work done. There's nothing mentioned here about the affiliation status that we've got now with Calcutta and Bombay universities. We have the authority now to run PhD courses and hand out degrees to our own scholars. So there's a lot of important stuff going on now. They're making contacts with a lot of university people in both cities. So, I did this for 9 years, and I decided it was time to hand it over to somebody more competent. My main duty had always been, apart from supervising the staff and deciding what the year's program would be, my main duty was collecting the funds to keep everything running. Now I can't do that anymore. So I realized that the next phase of development for the BRC has to come from the academics. I'm not a scholar, I'm not an academic, and I've gone as far as I could go in developing this project. Now they've got a whole bunch of scholars that are running things, and they're making a lot of contacts. So we're starting to make an impression in the academic community, and that's what we want. They'll come, they'll study Prabhupada's books, they'll study Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati's books, they'll study Bhaktivedanta Thakur's books, all the way back to Lord Chaitanya, every author. And then people will come and they'll learn the practical value of being in the Gaudiya Vaishnava Sampradaya. So that's, as I say, 20 years, 30 years, 50 years. We have to think in terms, of longer periods of time now. This is built to last. Some of the original universities in places like England, like Oxford and Cambridge, they're over 800 years old. So in 800 years or 1,000 years, we still want to have, a Gaudiya Vaishnava, not library, university. So that's our aim. All right, that's it for tonight. I think it's more or less on time. Does anybody have any quick questions or comments?
Amazing, very impressive. Amazing.
Well, it is. When you see it like this, it's quite stunning. The stuff that we've been able to find, all these handwritten documents, Bhaktivedanta Thakur and Bhaktivedanta. It's quite an amazing experience. So
we have seen thousands of manuscripts in Madhva Maths and Sri Vaishnava Maths just laying down, farmers just in the boxes, neglected.
Yes, well, we're at that stage where even the owners of the manuscript collections have no regard for them anymore because everything's digital. On the TV, on the scanners, or your iPad or whatever it is. So they don't take care of the original literatures, and it's a big, big mistake. Because although you can manipulate large amounts of data on the internet and whatever, if it breaks down, you lose everything. That's the problem. If there's some war in the future, all those computers that are, where all this stuff is stored, it's all gone. So I think it's very important that we have to preserve physically whatever we find. We can put it on the internet as well. But the, documents that we've got from 200 or 300 years ago now, that's the example that we have to follow. We must have, physical representation as well. Any other questions or comments? No? All right, we'll finish there. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur ki jai. Srila Bhaktivedanta Thakur ki jai. Gaur Premanand.
Sauri Prabhu ki jai.